Absolute Batman and Absolute Wonder Woman finally meet each other, thank God. Which, by the way, I am traveling, so I can't be my loud, crazy, obnoxious self. But what this initially does is this picks up in Gateway City, specifically Veronica Kale having a conversation with Jack Grimm. Now, of course, as we know from Absolute Batman, Jack Grimm is the name or supposed name of Absolute Joker. Because if there's any one thing that we learned over the course of that story is that no one knows for sure what the Joker's story is. It's just what Alfred Pennyworth believes. It's something important to keep in mind when it comes to the Joker. But one of the things that happens is she talks about this idea of whether or not Absolute Wonder Woman had taken the bait, right, that had been left behind by Veronica Kale. Essentially, getting Absolute Wonder Woman to show up to the city of Gotham, right, by creating a kind of Mark of Hecate within Gotham itself, or at least that seemed to be the case. And so that's what led Absolute Wonder Woman to Gotham and to encounter Batman in the first place. And that's what's kind of interesting here, because when Absolute Wonder Woman shows up, she basically conjures the bat signal, which is pretty dope. It looks really, really amazing, but the whole thing's conjured out of magic. And so when he arrives on the scene, Wonder Woman is immediately just kind of like, I heard that you were quiet, but they may need to invent a new word for what you are. It's especially impressive considering your size. Now, Batman figures out pretty quickly that Absolute Wonder Woman is not an enemy. And so that's when Batman asks, right, like, this bat symbol, is it made of magic? And she simply just says, yes, right? I didn't want to traipse around your city uninvited, but you are hard to find. And this seemed to be the best way. And she just introduces herself as Diana, and Bruce just says, I'm Batman. And then of course he's like, define magic. Now here's the important thing to understand here in the Absolute universe, particularly when it comes to Batman. If you haven't been keeping up with Absolute Batman, I don't know anybody who hasn't, but if you haven't been keeping up with Absolute Batman, he's a very stripped down, unpolished version of the Batman that we know in DC Comics. So he doesn't have the insane levels of intellect. He doesn't have all this experience in the world dealing with like supernatural forces and things like that. He's just the answer to the question, what would happen if just like a humongous construction worker decided to become a vigilante? Because that's what he is. He's a construction worker, right? So again, unpolished, doesn't have any of the wealth. And so learning about this stuff for the first time from Diana is cool, because what it does is it kind of creates a bridge between the two of them, one teaching the other. And that's why she says advanced chemistry with unconventional intentions and unusual resources, which in a lot of ways just kind of defines Batman, if you think about it that way. And that's where she says, right, you hurl yourself from these skyscrapers with no fear, but you cannot fly. How did you learn to do that? And he just says necessity. And that's where she says a good answer. Because the reality here is that when it comes to the manipulation of magic, and in the case of Wonder Woman being able to use magic, it really was out of necessity, right? Being like stuck in the underworld, the realm of hell, that kind of a thing, being raised by her mother Cersei, that magic is a form of survival in the same way that Batman does what he does, and it's a form of survival. And so that's why she tells him, right, I am not here by accident. I find I need your aid. And Bruce just says, I'll need more than that, right? That's not a good enough answer. And so, of course, Wonder Woman responds, and she says, I'm here about 4 recent murders. And Batman tells her, it's Gotham. Right, 4 murders barely make the news these days. And she says, of course, but they are all connected by the symbol on my arm. It's called the Mark of Hecate, and a bloody version of it appeared at each of those crime scenes. Now, obviously, this is not my city, nor is detective work my strength, although I have a detective friend that helps with that kind of thing. And so Batman says, right, I saw her with you on the news. Everybody did. You should be careful with your exposure. You may be a god, but the people around you are not. And as we know, this is him speaking from experience, right? That Batman understands that there is a price to be paid by bringing your friends into your vigilante antics, right? What was the price that he paid? Absolute Penguin, Absolute Riddler, right? Absolute Two-Face, Absolute Killer Croc. These are his friends who had basically been destroyed in some ways physically and in pretty much every way emotionally and mentally, right? I mean, these guys were destroyed by Bane or by Arkham. So Batman knows that if you don't create a circumstance where your friends are kept out of the crossfire, right, out of the line of fire of your enemies, they will go after them. And that's an important lesson that Diana hasn't quite learned yet. She hasn't really experienced what it means to see her friends destroyed at the hands of her enemies. Undoubtedly she will, but she says, right, I'm afraid that bell has rung for me. I cannot go back into the shadows now. And so Batman asks her, would you? If you could. And she says, I think not. right? Love is transformative, and I don't know how to show that to people without living it. And so that's where Bruce just says, and I guess we all have our own paths. And he says, though I think my father would have liked yours. Now, I don't know if that really goes towards the idea that like he truly wants to shift his direction and become a bat of love, that kind of thing. The love bat of Gotham City, right? Sharing his kindness with the world. I don't know if that's what he's shooting for. But what I do think is important here is the idea that Batman has seen how dark it can get, but he hasn't quite seen how good it can get. And so I think a part of him, at least on some level, wants to experience that, right? And so that's why Wonder Woman just says, then I will take that as the compliment that it is. But you should know I am no god. And she asks, are you? And Batman says, a god? Of course I am. I'm Batman. No, he says, of course I'm not, right? I am not a god at all, right? And she's like, excellent. And he's kind of like shocked by the idea, right? Like, I mean, is there an issue with the fact that I'm not a god? And Wonder Woman just says, right, my mother was sure that you were a bat god when she saw you in her scrying pool. We made a bet about it. I will need some kind of proof, right, to basically show that I've won that bet. Which I think is kind of funny, right? Like making bets on whether or not Batman is a god. But of course she says, Cersei does hate to pay up on a bet. She's forever finding some angle. She's absolutely diabolical. And that's when Wonder Woman says, I almost forgot, right? Forgive my manners. I was raised in hell, though that is no excuse. And where Batman asks her what it is that she's presenting him with, she says, it's a gift. Hospitality is a big deal in Greek culture. And Batman just kind of says, like, I thought you were raised in hell. And she says, well, the underworld is more accurate, but a person can be more than one thing. Surely you of all people understand this. And so Batman asks, what is this? And this is an amazing callback to Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman run, because she says it's an enchanted talisman of Hecate. And she says, it's my own twist on Hecate. If you touch this with your bare skin and demand an audience with Diana of the Wild Isle, if I am on this plane of existence, I will come to your aid. And Batman just asks, seriously? And she's like, it's powerful magic, right? Mine, my mother's, and that of Hecate herself. Now, here's an important thing, and this is the reason why it's a callback. How many of you guys, I don't know how many of you guys actually read it. We did cover it, but there's a story called Wonder Woman Hecate. It's a phenomenal story. It's arguably one of the greatest Wonder Woman stories ever written. It was written by Greg Rucka. The idea behind it, and to kind of sidetrack from this story for a second, because you're going to love this, the idea behind it is that a woman shows up on the doorstep of Wonder Woman swearing a vow of Hecate. And because of how Hecate works, Wonder Woman has to take care of her. She has to provide her a home. She has to feed her, clothe her, that kind of a thing, treat her with a humble nature. But the woman cannot take advantage of it, right? She can't stay like indefinitely. She has to respect the offerings of Wonder Woman, but then leave when that need is satisfied, when her reason for, asking for that vow has been satisfied. And if either one of them violate the honor of the other during the vow of Hecate, the fates will kill them, and they would kill Wonder Woman. And what you end up learning is the woman showed up on the doorstep of Diana because she was fleeing Gotham after having murdered the men who had basically forced her sister into like prostitution, and Batman's trying to track her down. And so when Batman shows up on the doorstep of Wonder Woman tells him, this woman's under my protection, and then Wonder Woman beats the hell out of Batman and throws him out of her apartment. So it's a phenomenal story. It's an incredible story, and that's just the tip of it, right? That's just one part of it. This is a general gist, but that's one part of it. So that's why it's a great callback to that idea, right? The kind of bond that connects them as far as magic is concerned. And so after that, Wonder Woman asks, would you mind escorting me to the most recent crime scene so that I may examine it? Which of course, Batman does. Now, this is when you get into something really, really cool, and it's a potential teaser for what may be coming down the pipe when it comes to Absolute Batman. Because what you end up doing is you end up going several miles outside the city of Gotham. And anybody who knows anything about the Batman mythos immediately knows what we're talking about here. But as they get out there, right, Batman says, it's best to go on foot from here, although you could still fly. And of course, Wonder Woman's just like, walking's fine, I suppose. And she says, this swamp teeters with power. What is its name? And Batman says, Slaughter Swamp. And she says, subtle, right? And that's where Batman says, we're not known for our subtlety in Gotham. Now, why is Slaughter Swamp an important place? Slaughter Swamp is an important place because of the magical properties that are contained there, but because it's also the foundation and the basis for one of Batman's most notable villains, one of the biggest villains, honestly, in DC Universe, which is Solomon Grundy, right? Like, it's cool. So imagine what like absolute Solomon Grundy is going to look like now that we have like Slaughter Swamp. I mean, it would be like introducing the concept of the green in the absolute universe, but then never invoking Swamp Thing. You know what I mean? Like, of course it has to happen. At least I would hope it does. But kind of continuing on here, Wonder Woman says, this is so remote. How was this crime scene even discovered? And Batman just says an anonymous tip, which in and of itself seems suspicious. And he says, I have been busy, which of course refers to the whole absolute Bane storyline. And he says, I only saw the reports, but from what I did see, this crime scene and the others connected to it, they did not add up. It pointed to something bigger. And so Wonder Woman, of course, ends up conjuring some magic. And when she does, as they make their way through here, right, like Batman kind of looks around at just this bloody crime scene, right? And he's like, your goddess Hecate loves blood. And Wonder Woman just says, all gods do, as does magic. It's fundamental. And she says, I see you're too polite to ask. I mostly use my own blood for my magic. It's freely available and it's incredibly powerful. And she says, magic was done here, but I don't think it was in honor of Hecate. And so Batman just says, explain. And she says, if they were true disciples, there would have been 3 candles on this symbol, or perhaps 6 or 9. And Batman, of course, recognizes that it's multiples of 3, and she says she's a triple goddess, so it's a key number in her worship. Quite frankly, if there was going to be more than one bloody symbol of her mark in this room, that's where Batman says there would have been 3. And she says, exactly. And where Batman says, I don't know about magic, and looking around, he just kind of says, all this looks staged, right? It looks like it was just set up. And Wonder Woman agrees with it, right? She says, to a disciple, some of these ingredients are wrong. Also, this killing was 2 days ago, correct? And Batman says yes. And she says, then the moon was in the wrong position. A witch could do this, right? This spell and cast it all, of course, but a disciple would wait for a more favorable position. And so she asked the question, right, were there any organs missing from the body that they found? And Batman says yes. And she points out, right, a liver, and then figures out that like lungs, a heart, maybe a stomach, all these things have been taken from the body here. And Batman asks, right, like, what do they need all this for? Like, how have you figured this out? And she says, I think someone is trying to build a magically constructed form, like a homunculus or a golem, a powerful figure that could be remotely controlled. But why the ruse? Right? Why pretend that it's Hecate when it's not? And that's where Batman just says, I don't know, maybe it's to like draw you in for a trap, right? For you or for me or something like that. This conversation here, and it's something that I hope you're picking up here, this conversation here is not like a conversation you would expect from like a Batman and Wonder Woman conversation in the main DC universe. Batman would have clearly had it all figured out. He would have known exactly what's going on, and it wouldn't have been like maybe to draw you into a trap. He would have been like, it's definitely to draw you into a trap. That's what's going on here. It's a trap for you. It's a trap for me. Here's the person most likely doing it because I found this hair follicle and I pulled out this hair follicle examiner from like my bat utility belt and I was studying it while you were looking around, and now I know who's behind all this. Let's go get him. And like that's it, right? That's exactly how a Batman story would have unfolded in the main DC universe. But I love the fact that it's so unpolished, right? And it's so basic, right? You basically have 2 people who are incredibly capable in their own right, meeting for the first time, but they also feel so like real world, if that makes any sense. Hopefully it makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense at all. But the fact is, right, that in this conversation that they have, when Batman identifies the possibility that it might be a trap, Wonder Woman just says, perhaps, right, would it be possible to see the other sites? And at that point, Batman's like, I mean, we could, but look, here's the thing, right? Like, we should be more proactive, right? I found something in the case files that I think points to an abandoned church with a strange clock tower across the swamp. I say that we start there. And she's like, well, then just lead the way. And so when they get in there, the place is occupied, right? It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be an abandoned church, but the whole place is occupied. And that's where Wonder Woman says, do you mind being carried briefly, right? We could just cut to the end of the line violently. And Batman's just like, I like the violent part. And so when they get in there, there's like this whole huge kind of like seance type thing that's being done there, right? Clearly dark magic is being practiced here. And that's where Batman says they're in some kind of altered state. They didn't even blink when we busted through the window. And that's where he goes to investigate, and Wonder Woman tells him, right, don't cross the barrier. But ultimately he does, and essentially falls into it along with Wonder Woman when she grabs him to try to stop him. And so now that they're trapped inside, she's like, well, I mean, we're in now, right? Like the circle's broken. And Batman asks, like, can we try to leave? And she's like, no, right? We could try, but it will be like trying to chew our legs off, right? And she says, the construct looks strange, unfinished. And Batman thinks initially that it's good news because whatever it is they're trying to create cannot be recreated. And she's like, maybe, right? Unless they're not trying to build a construct, that what they're trying to do is control one. And that's where things get really interesting here, because one of the things that we end up doing, and goes into the kind of the crazy mythos of Wonder Woman over the years, you jump back to Veronica Kale. and the conversation that she's having with Absolute Joker. And she says that you're the one who gave me the idea for this whole thing. And he says, really? And she's like, don't play dumb. You are better than that. And that's where she asks, like, were you manipulating me and everything that you told me? Now, we don't know exactly what he told her, but we find out here in a second, right? And he says, well, was it manipulation or just pointing you to the convenient truth? And Joker says, also, since you didn't share the specifics of your plan, I'm not even sure which truth we are talking about. And Veronica Kale says, of course you are. And that's where he says, oh, the thing about the Amazons, the story of their great and miraculous child, the last Amazon, the one that some myths claim is made of clay. And she says, yes, that one. And that's where Joker says, and if she's made of clay, and Veronica finishes the statement, she's nothing more than a fancy golem. So quite literally, this goes into the origin story that Wonder Woman is made of clay by Zeus. And so it's not like she's the biological child of Zeus and Hippolyta. No, she was created from clay. And it's kind of cool that they're sticking with that origin, because that's when she starts to figure out they're controlling me. And in that moment, she looks to Batman and just says, run. And of course, as you guys know from Bruce Wayne, you ain't got to tell him twice, because this dude bolts for the door. Like, he immediately takes off running towards the clock, right? He's getting out of there as fast as he can. The whole time, like, Absolute Wonder Woman just starts like spouting off with these crazy spells. And Batman has no clue what's happening here, right? It's actually kind of hilarious, to be honest with you. But the reason why she's casting these spells is she says, I have to help him before I fully lose control. Deleting my magic arm may be the best that I can do. And so what ends up happening is that now that she's been completely overtaken, right, by these folks, like literally controlling her like a puppet, she shows up and confronts Batman. She never says a word, right? But he says, Diana, can you hear me in there? This isn't you. You do not want to do this. He tries to talk reason to her, but of course she's completely overtaken by the spell and there's no reason to be talked whatsoever. And she starts throwing him around like a rag doll. Now, it is cool, and one of the best things about this, which for those of you guys who are not really familiar with Absolute Batman, you may not know about this, Batman's cape, for lack of a better word, at the end of it, it has hooks. So Batman can literally use his cape to hook onto things and to hang on to things. And that's why when he gets thrown and he actually jumps out of the way of Wonder Woman, he literally hooks his cape onto a rod in the ceiling and then throws down smoke bombs. So again, it's not polished, it's not fancy, it is dirty and it's grimy, right? But it's phenomenal. It's absolutely incredible, right? I love the way this is done, because the whole time he keeps trying to talk to her while he's hanging upside down, right? Diana, I know that you are in there, hear me. But it makes no difference whatsoever, because at that point he comes down with like his battle axe, right? And literally just like hacks into her leg, but she just kicks him away and presumably her leg heals, and then grabs the battle axe for herself and starts coming down, like literally coming at this guy. And the whole time he's just like, okay, like if I don't do something, I am going to die. And that's when he says, maybe, right? One chance. And so what ends up happening is as she gets closer to him, he tears off his glove and then he touches the item that Wonder Woman gave him and says, I demand an audience with Diana of the Wild Isle. It breaks the smell and it snaps her back, right? It's really cool. It's Batman, right? That is the kind of detective, quick thinking, fast paced Batman that we're familiar with. And so those of you guys who are familiar with Batman mythos are probably looking at this and you're just sort of like, this is really giving like Legends of the Dark Knight vibes, right? Like the first year that Batman was Batman post-crisis, right? It really is, and that's really what it is, right? It's really giving like these early days type feels to Batman stories. And so at that point, Wonder Woman snaps back, right? And she's just like, thank you, right? And Batman's just like, yeah, thank you. Like, right? That's awesome. But essentially, they figure out what's going on here, right? That Wonder Woman says, this spell would not have worked without my own hair and blood. I think you'd have to be quite connected to have managed to get both of those things from me. That and the witch's trance continues to suggest a hidden enemy pulling the strings. And Batman's like, yeah, I would agree with that. The issue with this is the whole thing is booby-trapped, because when Wonder Woman goes up there and says, well, we should try to destroy the construct and the witches may not be lost, the reality is that the whole place explodes. Because it's booby-trapped, it's designed to destroy them all. And that's when we basically learn from Veronica Kale that it didn't work, right? The idea and the hope is that they could somehow find another way to destroy Wonder Woman and Batman at the same time, right? Killing two birds with one stone, because that's really what all this is. But it's going to be a lot tougher than they initially thought that it was going to be. One, because of the magical prowess of absolute Wonder Woman, and two, just because of Batman being Batman, right? And so in the aftermath of all of this, there is a huge revelation and a huge idea that comes from it, in the sense that Wonder Woman says, the magical and unconventional nature of my birth seems to have left me open to some attacks that I hadn't considered. I will have to watch out for it in the future. And then at that point, she presents Batman with a jump drive, and she says, I freed a government scientist from a prison maze, which is from the most recent Wonder Woman story, and we covered it. And she says, he was uninterested in returning to the government that had put him there. Additionally, he was grateful to be rescued and gave me that thumb drive, which has quite a bit of information about you and about all of us. And that's where Batman says, all of us, you mean the Superman. And she says, I do, and a few more besides. And so at that point, it starts to snow. But this is an important distinction because it says that Batman already knows about absolute Superman. They're already aware of each other. They simply just haven't had a reason to encounter one another yet. And where there is a little bit of banter back and forth about the idea that Wonder Woman has never encountered snow before, she's only ever really seen it in like pictures or a mountaintop or something like that, but it's actually like touching her skin for the first time, and she's kind of enamored by it all. When she initially puts out the idea that she knows the identity of Bruce, but doesn't want to say the name because she feels like that it is really just up to Bruce Wayne to be the one to make that declaration and to say this is my name, that Bruce tells her, right, like, say it, say my name if you really, really know my name. And she says, Bruce, right, don't you think that we should make friends with the Superman, right? I think that we're going to need lots of friends if we're going to save this world. So it's setting up the Trinity in the absolute universe, right? It's setting up the whole Trinity storyline, like, which is going to be phenomenal. Absolute Batman, absolute Superman, and absolute Wonder Woman all working together. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Again, I am traveling, so I'm sorry I can't be my crazy, obnoxious self, but thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.